Ladies and gentlemen, we all face moments when our hearts feel shattered, when dreams crumble, relationships falter, or life doesn't go as planned. But let me remind you, there is a divine hope that can turn your pain into purpose. When we experience heartbreak, it's easy to feel like our world is falling apart. The weight of the pain, the disappointment, the shattered dreams can make it seem as though we'll never recover. It feels final, like the chapter is closed, and all that's left is the hurt. But let me tell you something today, your brokenness is not the end. It's the beginning of something new, something better. It's the start of God's restoration plan in your life. Sometimes when we're in the middle of our pain, we lose perspective. We focus on what we've lost, on what's broken, and it's hard to imagine anything good coming from it. But God sees the bigger picture. He sees beyond the pain. He sees the purpose. He sees the growth, the strength, and the blessings that can come from even the most difficult situations. In His hands, your brokenness is not a limitation. It's an opportunity for transformation. Think about a seed planted in the ground. At first, it looks like the seed has been buried, hidden away in the darkness. But what's really happening? The seed is in the perfect environment to grow, to break open and sprout something new. The darkness is not its end, it's its beginning. In the same way, when your heart feels broken, it's not the end of your story. God is planting something new in you. The tears you've cried, the prayers you've whispered, the nights you've spent questioning, they're not wasted. They're watering the soil of your soul for the new things God wants to grow in your life. God specializes in restoration. He's not just in the business of fixing things, He's in the business of making them better. In the Bible, we see countless stories of people who thought their lives were over, only to discover that God was just getting started. Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, thought his dreams were over. But God used that very situation to elevate him to a position of influence and authority. Job lost everything, his family, his wealth, his health, and yet God restored him, giving him double what he had before. Ruth lost her husband, her sense of security. But God brought her into a new season, one that was far greater than she could have imagined. These stories are reminders that brokenness is not the end. It's the beginning of a greater work that God is doing. But here's the key. You have to bring your brokenness to God. You can't hold on to it trying to fix it on your own or bury it deep down hoping it will go away. You have to surrender it to Him. When you bring your pain, your disappointment, and your hard hatch to God, you're placing it in the hands of the one who can do something about it. You're inviting Him into the situation, giving Him permission to work in ways that only He can. You see, when you surrender your brokenness to God, you're not giving up, you're giving it over. There's a big difference. Giving up is saying there's no hope. It's over. But giving it over is saying, God, I trust You. I don't see the way forward, but I know You do. And when you take that step of faith, you position yourself for restoration. Restoration doesn't always happen the way we expect it to. Sometimes God brings back what was lost, but other times He does something entirely new. He takes the shattered pieces of your life and creates something you never could have imagined. It might not look the way you thought it would, but it will be good. Because when God restores, He doesn't just replace what was lost, He also multiplies it. He adds joy where there was sorrow, peace where there was chaos, and hope where there was despair. It's important to understand that your brokenness doesn't disqualify you from God's love or His plans. In fact, it's often in our weakest, most broken moments that we experience His power and grace the most. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." God's power shines brightest in our broken places. It's in those moments that He shows us who He is, a healer, a restorer, a redeemer. When you bring your brokenness to God, you're stepping into a process that's not always instant, and it's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Little by little, God begins to heal the wounds, to mend the broken pieces, and to breathe new life into areas that felt dead. You may not see it right away, but trust that it's happening. Healing is a process, and God is faithful to complete it. So today, don't let your brokenness define you. Don't let it convince you that your best days are behind you. Instead, see it for what it is, the starting point of God's restoration plan. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and see that the very thing that broke you was the thing God used to bless you. God's love is not like human love, which can sometimes falter or fade in difficult times. His love is constant, unchanging, and unconditional. It doesn't shrink back when things get messy or complicated. He doesn't look at your pain and say, that's too much for me to handle. Instead, He says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He invites you to bring your brokenness to Him, to let Him into the places that hurt the most. When you feel like no one understands, God does. The Bible tells us that Jesus was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. He knows what it feels like to be betrayed, to be abandoned, to be misunderstood. He carried the weight of the world's sin and sorrow on His shoulders, and He did it for you. That's the depth of his love. He doesn't just know your pain from a distance, he's felt it. And because he's felt it, he knows how to heal it. In the moments when you feel unworthy of love because of your pain or mistakes, remember that God's love is not dependent on your circumstances or your performance. You don't have to earn his love or prove that you're worthy of it. It's a gift that he freely gives, no matter where you are or what you're going through. Even in your darkest moments, his love is there, reaching out to you, ready to lift you up. Sometimes the pain we carry comes with feelings of guilt or shame. We think, if only I had done things differently, I wouldn't be in this situation. But God's love doesn't condemn you, covers you. His grace is greater than your mistakes, and his mercy is new every morning. He doesn't see you as broken beyond repair. He sees you as someone worth redeeming, someone worth restoring. That's why he sent his son Jesus to show you just how far his love will go to bring you back to him. When you open your heart to God's love, you allow him to begin the healing process. His love is like a balm that soothes the deepest wounds. It doesn't just mask the pain, it transforms it. It takes the broken pieces of your heart and starts to put them back together, piece by piece, in a way that only he can. His love brings peace where there was turmoil, hope where there was despair, and strength where there was weakness. But here's the thing, you have to let him in. God's love is always available, but he won't force himself into your life. He waits for you to invite him into your pain, to trust him with your hurt. That can be a hard step to take, especially when you're in the middle of the storm. But when you do, you'll find that his love is a safe place of refuge where you can lay down your burdens and find rest for your soul. God's love isn't just about healing your heart, it's about renewing your spirit. It's about giving you a fresh start, a new perspective, and a deeper understanding of who he is. When you experience his love in the midst of your pain, it changes you. It reminds you that you're not defined by what you've been through, but by who you are in him. You are his child, deeply loved and fully accepted no matter what. There's a verse in Psalm 34 that says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Notice it doesn't say he's close to the strong or the perfect. It says he's close to the brokenhearted. That's where he does some of his best work in the lives of those who feel like they have nothing left to give. He doesn't turn away from your pain. He draws near to it. He sees every tear, hears every cry, and feels every ache. And his response is always the same: love, compassion, and grace. When you let God's love into your broken places, it starts to change how you see yourself, your circumstances, and even your future. You begin to realize that your pain is not a permanent state. It's a season. And in that season, God is working even when you can't see it. His love is the constant thread that weaves through every moment of your life, reminding you that you're never alone, never forgotten, and never beyond his reach. When life doesn't go as planned, when the pain feels overwhelming and the disappointment heavy, it's natural to hold on to it all tightly. We clutch our hurt, replay the scenarios in our minds, and try to make sense of what went wrong. But holding on to bitterness and disappointment doesn't bring healing. It only keeps the wounds open. It creates walls that block the peace and joy God is ready to pour into your life. To truly heal, you have to release it. You have to let go and make room for something greater. Bitterness has a way of taking root in our hearts, often without us even realizing it. It starts small, a hurtful comment, a betrayal, an unmet expectation. Over time, if we don't address it, it grows, taking up space in our hearts and crowding out the good things God wants to place there. Bitterness doesn't just affect how we see the past, it affects how we live in the present and how we approach the future. It clouds our judgment, steals our joy, and keeps us stuck in a cycle of pain. Disappointment, too, can be a heavy weight to carry. We all have moments when life doesn't turn out the way we hoped or prayed it would. Maybe it's a relationship that ended, a dream that didn't come to pass, or a door that closed unexpectedly. The temptation is to dwell on what was lost, to replay the what ifs and if onlys in our minds. But dwelling on disappointment only magnifies it. It doesn't change the past or make sense of the pain. It simply keeps us trapped in it. God doesn't want us to live in the shadows of bitterness and disappointment. He knows the toll they take on our hearts, our minds, and our spirits. That's why he invites us to release them to him. He doesn't ask us to ignore the pain or pretend it doesn't exist. Instead, he says, bring it to me. Lay it down at my feet. Trust me with it. When we release our bitterness and disappointment to God, we're not denying the reality of what happened. We're choosing to trust him with the outcome. Letting go doesn't mean the hurt never mattered or that the pain wasn't real. It means we're choosing not to let it define us or control us any longer. It means we're making a conscious decision to forgive even when it's hard. Forgiveness isn't about condoning what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of anger and resentment. It's about saying, God, I'm giving this to you because I trust you to handle it better than I ever could. When we hold on to bitterness and disappointment, we close our hearts to the new things God wants to do. It's like holding on to old, worn-out clothes that no longer fit, leaving no room in the closet for something new and beautiful. God wants to fill your heart with His peace, His joy, and His hope. But He can't do that if your heart is already full of negativity. There's a verse in Isaiah that says, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. God is always working on something new, but we have to be willing to let go of the old to receive it. Releasing bitterness and disappointment is not something we can do in our own strength. It's a process that requires God's help and His grace. When we're honest with Him about our pain, when we cry out to Him and ask Him to take it, He is faithful to step in. He gives us the strength to forgive, the courage to let go, and the peace that surpasses all understanding. He replaces the bitterness with healing and the disappointment with renewed hope. It's important to remember that releasing doesn't always happen overnight. It's a journey, and there may be days when the old feelings try to creep back in. That's when we have to remind ourselves of who God is and what He's promised. He is a God of restoration, a God who works all things together for our good. When we choose to release bitterness and disappointment, we're saying, God, I trust you more than I trust my feelings. I trust that you can turn this pain into purpose, that you can take what the enemy meant for harm and use it for good. As we release, we begin to feel a lightness that only God can provide. The weight of bitterness is replaced with the freedom of forgiveness, and the heaviness of disappointment is replaced with the expectation of something new. We start to see life through a different lens, not through the lens of what we've lost, but through the lens of what God is doing and what He is in store. Releasing bitterness and disappointment is not about forgetting the past. It's about choosing not to live there. It's about stepping into the present and allowing God to work in your life. It's about trusting that His plans are better, that His ways are higher, and that His love is enough to heal every wound. When your heart is broken, it can feel like everything around you has fallen apart. The pieces of your life that once seemed so perfectly aligned are now scattered. It's hard to imagine how they could ever come back together. But here's the truth. God can take the pieces of your broken heart and create something more beautiful than before. What may seem like ruins to you is raw material in the hands of the Creator, the one who specializes in bringing beauty from ashes. God doesn't see your brokenness as a problem. He sees it as an opportunity. When you bring the shattered pieces of your life to Him, you're giving them to the one who has the power to restore, rebuild, and even redesign them into something extraordinary. He is not limited by the size of your hurt or the depth of your pain. In fact, it's often in our most broken moments that He does His most profound work. It's in those moments that He shows us that His strength is made perfect in our weakness. Think about how an artist creates a mosaic. They start with broken, jagged pieces that on their own might not seem like much. But in the artist's hands, those pieces are arranged in a way that forms something breathtaking. The brokenness becomes part of the story, part of the beauty. In the same way, God takes the broken pieces of your life and arranges them into something far greater than you could ever imagine. What felt like destruction becomes the foundation for something new and beautiful. Sometimes we look at the pieces of our broken hearts and think they're too far gone. We think there's no way this can be fixed. There's no way anything good can come from this. But God doesn't see limitations. He sees possibilities. In the Bible, there's a verse that says, He makes all things work together for the good of those who love Him. That means He can take even the most painful, shattered parts of your life and use them for a greater purpose. He doesn't waste anything, not your tears, not your struggles, not your hardships. The process of God creating something beautiful from your brokenness doesn't always happen quickly. It's not like flipping a switch, it's more like planting a seed. When you plant a seed in the ground, it doesn't sprout overnight. It takes time. It requires watering, sunlight, and patience. In the same way, God's work in your life is a process. It takes time for the pieces to come together, for the healing to take root, and for the beauty to emerge. But just like a seed eventually grows into something incredible, God's work in your brokenness will produce something extraordinary. One of the most amazing things about God is that He doesn't just put things back the way they were, He makes them better. When He restores, He goes above and beyond. He doesn't just fix what's broken, He makes it new. He adds depth, purpose, and strength to your story. The parts of your life that felt like they were falling apart become the very things that draw you closer to Him and reveal His glory. What the enemy meant for harm, God turns into something good. It's important to remember that the beauty God creates from your brokenness isn't just for you. It's for others too. Your story of healing and restoration can become a source of hope and encouragement for those around you. When people see how God has taken your broken pieces and made something beautiful, it inspires them to trust Him with their own brokenness. Your pain can become your platform, your mess can become your message, and your test can become your testimony. Letting God create something beautiful from your brokenness requires surrender. It means letting go of the need to control the outcome and trusting Him with the process. It means being willing to let go of the pieces you've been holding on to so tightly and placing them in His hands. That can be a scary step to take, especially when the hurt runs deep. But when you do, you'll find that His hands are gentle. His timing, His praise, plans are always for your good. God's ability to create beauty from brokenness is one of the most powerful expressions of His love for us. It's a reminder that no matter what we've been through, no matter how shattered we feel, we are never beyond His reach. He doesn't see you as broken beyond repair. He sees you as a masterpiece in progress. He sees the potential in your pain and the beauty in your story. All He asks is that you trust Him even when you don't understand. Your broken heart in God's hands is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of something new, something beautiful, and something more incredible than you could ever imagine. Trust Him with the process. Trust Him with the pieces. Trust Him to create something that will not only bring healing to your life, but will also glorify Him in ways you never thought possible. When you've been hurt, it's natural to want to close yourself off, to build walls around your heart to protect it from being broken again. You tell yourself, I'll never let anyone get that close to me again. I'll never let myself feel that vulnerable. It feels like self-preservation, like the only way to guard against more pain. But in reality, those walls don't just keep pain out, they also keep healing and love from coming in. What starts as a defense mechanism can quickly turn into a prison, one that isolates you from the people and blessings God has for you. God didn't create us to live with closed hearts. He designed us to love, to connect, and to experience the fullness of relationships with Him and with others. When we close off our hearts out of fear or pain, we're not just protecting ourselves, we're also blocking the very things that can bring healing and joy back into our lives. It's like locking yourself in a room to stay safe from the storm, but in doing so, you miss the sunshine when it finally breaks through the clouds. A closed heart might feel safe in the moment, but it doesn't lead to healing. Healing requires openness. It requires vulnerability. It requires allowing God to come into the places that hurt the most and trusting Him to do what only He can do. That kind of trust can be difficult, especially when your heart has been broken. But the truth is, God is the safest place for your heart. He won't misuse it. He won't take it for granted, and He won't hurt you. He will handle your heart with care, restoring it piece by piece and making it stronger than it was before. Opening your heart doesn't mean you won't ever experience pain again. It doesn't mean you won't face challenges or disappointments. But it does mean you're choosing to live fully, to step into the life God has for you rather than letting fear and pain dictate your path. It means you're trusting God to protect your heart as you take steps of faith, knowing that He is with you every step of the way. When you open your heart to God, you're also opening it to the possibility of new relationships, new opportunities, and new blessings. You're saying, God, I trust you to bring the right people into my life, the right situations, and the right timing. It's not about pretending the pain never happened. It's about believing that the future can be better than the past. It's about letting hope take root where bitterness once grew. One of the most beautiful things about God is that He doesn't just heal your heart in isolation. He often uses the people around you to be part of the healing process. He brings people into your life who will support you, encourage you, and remind you of your worth. But if your heart is closed, you might miss those connections. You might push away the very people God has sent to help you heal. That's why it's so important to open your heart not just to God, but also to the relationships He places in your life. Opening your heart doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're brave. It takes courage to trust again after you've been hurt. It takes faith to believe that God can bring good out of the pain. But when you take that step of courage, when you let down the walls and allow God to work, you'll find that healing begins to flow. You'll start to feel a lightness, a peace, and a joy that comes from knowing you're not carrying the burden alone. It's also important to understand that opening your heart doesn't mean you have to figure everything out on your own. You don't have to have all the answers or know exactly how to move forward. God doesn't expect you to fix your own heart. He just asks you to bring it to Him. He's the one who does the healing, the restoring, and the rebuilding. All you have to do is be willing to let Him in. As you open your heart, you'll begin to see how God uses even the hardest parts of your story for good. The pain you've experienced can become a source of strength, empathy, and compassion. It can deepen your understanding of God's love and His ability to work all things together for your good. It can also become a testimony that inspires and encourages others who are walking through their own seasons of heartbreak. An open heart is a heart that trusts God fully, even when it's been hurt before. It's a heart that says, I'm not going to let the pain of the past keep me from the blessings of the future. I'm not going to let fear win. I'm going to trust that God's plans for me are good. And I'm going to step into them with faith and confidence. That kind of heart is a powerful thing. It's a heart that is ready to love, to grow, and to experience the fullness of life that God has for you. There is something powerful about placing your trust in God when your heart is broken. It's not about ignoring the pain or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about choosing to believe that God's plan for your life is still good, even when circumstances don't make sense. Trusting God doesn't mean you have all the answers or that you understand why things happened the way they did. It means you're willing to surrender your pain to Him, to let Him guide you through the darkness and into the light of His purpose. The Bible reminds us time and time again that God is close to the brokenhearted. He doesn't stand at a distance, observing your pain from afar. He is near, intimately aware of every tear you've cried and every burden you've carried. He doesn't just see your hurt, He feels it. The same God who created the universe is the same God who cares deeply about the condition of your heart. He is not indifferent to your pain. He is moved by it, and He wants to bring healing to every part of your life. Trusting God means letting go of the need to control everything. When your heart is broken, it's tempting to hold on tightly, to try to fix things in your own strength or figure out why things fell apart. But there are some questions that won't have answers this side of heaven. And there are some things you can't repair on your own. That's where trust comes in. It's about saying, God, I don't understand why this happened, but I trust that you do. I don't see a way forward, but I trust that you have a plan. I can't fix this on my own, so I'm giving it to you. When you trust God with your broken heart, you're inviting Him into the deepest, most vulnerable parts of your life. You're allowing Him to take the pieces of your pain and turn them into something meaningful. Trusting God doesn't mean you won't still feel the hurt, but it does mean you won't have to carry it alone. His strength becomes your strength, His peace becomes your peace, and His hope becomes your hope. Trust often requires patience. Healing doesn't always happen overnight, and God's timing is rarely the same as ours. When you trust Him, you're choosing to believe that His timing is perfect, even when it feels slow. You're trusting that He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating things for your good, even when you can't see it. Patience is hard, especially when you're in pain, but it's in those moments of waiting that your faith grows stronger. Trusting God in the waiting builds a foundation of faith that will carry you through future storms. One of the hardest parts of trusting God with a broken heart is releasing the pain to Him. It's easy to hold on to it, to let it define you, or to use it as a shield against further hurt. But when you release your pain to God, you're giving Him permission to work in your life in ways you never thought possible. You're allowing Him to bring healing, restoration, and purpose out of what feels like destruction. It's not about forgetting the pain. It's about letting God use it to shape you into the person He created you to be. Trusting God also means trusting His promises. He has promised never to leave you or forsake you. He has promised to be your refuge and strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. He has promised to give you a hope and a future. When your heart is broken, hold on to those promises. Speak them over your life. Remind yourself of who God is and what He has said. His word is a firm foundation, a rock you can stand on when everything else feels shaky. It's important to remember that trust is a choice. It's not something that always comes naturally, especially when you're hurting. But every day you have the opportunity to choose trust over fear, faith over doubt, and hope over despair. You have the opportunity to say, God, I don't understand, but I trust you. I don't feel strong, but I trust your strength. I don't see the way forward, but I trust that you do. Trusting God with a broken heart doesn't mean you'll never face challenges or setbacks. It doesn't mean the journey will be easy or that the pain will disappear overnight. But it does mean that you'll never have to walk through it alone. God will be with you every step of the way, guiding you, comforting you, and strengthening you. His presence will sustain you, His love will heal you, and His faithfulness will carry you through. Trusting Him is the key to moving forward, to finding healing, and to discovering the beauty that can come from even the deepest pain. In the end, giving your broken heart to God is the most powerful step you can take toward healing and restoration. It's an act of surrender, trust, and faith that invites His love and grace into your pain. God is not only able to heal your heart, but to transform your story into something more beautiful than you could have imagined. When you let go of the bitterness, open your heart, and trust Him with the pieces, He will bring peace, purpose, and joy back into your life. He can turn your heartache into hope, your pain into strength, and your brokenness into a testimony of His unfailing love. So take that step and let God write a new chapter in your life, one filled with healing, redemption, and the fullness of His promises.